Somewhere between 6 and 10,000 years ago, one person, one single human being near the Black Sea, had a tiny glitch in one gene, a regulatory switch flipped. And if your eyes are green right now, that switch is still flipped inside you. You are carrying a copy of that exact accident, not something similar to it, not a version of it, the same one. Here's the thing. You've probably had this happen before. Someone locks onto your eyes mid-conversation and just stops listening for a second. Maybe a stranger at a coffee shop. Maybe a family member who's told you a dozen times you're the only one in 3 generations with eyes like that. You've felt the staring. You felt the, wait, are those real? And you've probably never had an actual answer for why your eyes do this to people. Why they pull attention the way brown eyes almost never do. So let's get into it. Because the real answer isn't romantic folklore. It's population genetics. And it's better than the myth. Green eyes show up in roughly 2% of people worldwide. Not 2% evenly spread. 2% clustered hard into specific corners of the map, mostly Northern and Eastern Europe, with pockets in the Near East, tracing straight back to that founder population. And here's what's interesting. Rare doesn't mean random. When a trait is this geographically concentrated, it's not because nature rolled dice in 1,000 different places, and green happened to come up occasionally. It's because there's a single traceable point of origin, and everyone carrying the trait today is, genetically speaking, downstream of it. That's a different kind of rare, the kind you can actually follow backward like a trail. And this is the part almost nobody knows. In 2008, geneticist Hans Eiberg and his team at the University of Copenhagen ran the numbers on this and found something that sounds almost too clean to be real. Every blue-eyed person, and by extension, the related genetic pathway producing green, shares a mutation in a regulatory region near the OCA2 gene, controlled by a nearby gene called HERC2 that traces back to one common ancestor, one person, somewhere between 6,000 and 10,000 years ago, in the region near the Black Sea and Caspian Sea. That's called a founder effect, when a single mutation in a single individual gets carried forward through enough generations that it eventually shows up in millions of descendants, all sharing that one original copy. Geneticists call this identity by descent. It means the exact base pair in your DNA controlling how much pigment your iris produces is not just similar to a stranger's on the other side of the planet. It is, in a very real sense, the same letter, inherited from the same source. Your DNA is a photocopy of one person's accident, 10,000 years removed. Sit with that for a second, because it's genuinely strange. You didn't inherit a trait like green eyes. You inherited a specific molecular event that happened to one human, one time, in one place, and it's been quietly photocopying itself down through hundreds of generations, surviving migrations, famines, wars, entire empires rising and falling, just to land, eventually, in your face. Now here's where the biology gets genuinely elegant, because green eyes aren't made the way you probably think. Brown eyes are pigment, melanin, sitting dense in the iris stroma, absorbing most wavelengths of light and reflecting brown back at you. Simple chemistry. Green is not that. Green is what's called a structural color. And here's the wild part. It's built the same way the sky is blue. When your iris has low melanin, incoming light penetrates deeper into the stroma and scatters off the tissue itself, and shorter wavelengths, blues, scatter more efficiently than longer ones. That's Rayleigh scattering, the exact physics that turns a cloudless afternoon sky blue instead of white. Your iris is doing a light trick, not wearing a pigment. Then, layered on top of that blue-producing scatter, there's a trace amount of a yellowish pigment called lipochrome sitting in the front layers of the iris. Blue light scattering from underneath, yellow pigment filtering from above. Mix those the way you'd mix paint, and you get green, which is why green eyes are genetically in between, not a distinct category, but a precise ratio between almost no melanin and a little more, with a lipochrome tipping the balance. And it's also why your eyes probably shift, greener in some light, almost hazel or gray in others. That's not your imagination, and it's not mood. Structural color is inherently light-dependent in a way pigment-based brown simply isn't. Brown eyes look brown in a cave. Yours don't. If this is starting to explain things you've noticed about your own eyes, but never had a real reason for why they change, why people can't stop looking, why there's only one other person in your whole extended family with eyes like yours. Stay with me, because it goes deeper than the biology. There's a real evolutionary puzzle buried in here that most people never even think to ask about. Because think about it, less melanin in the iris isn't an upgrade. Melanin isn't decorative, it's protective. It absorbs UV radiation, shields underlying tissue, reduces glare. A mutation that reduces it should, in theory, be a liability. Nature quietly edits back out over a few thousand years. Instead, it spread. Population geneticists have a few competing theories for why, and it's worth being honest that none of them are fully settled science. They're strong hypotheses, not closed cases. One is sexual selection. Rare visible traits in ancestral populations may have functioned as mate preference signals. The same logic behind a lot of unusual coloration across species. Novelty gets noticed, noticed gets chosen. Another is migration into low UV environments. As early populations moved north into regions with weaker, more indirect sunlight, the protective cost of lower iris pigment dropped because there was simply less radiation to protect against. Less cost meant less pressure to select the mutation back out. And a third, less romantic explanation is genetic drift. In a small founder population, traits can spread through pure chance. No selective advantage required at all, just the statistical luck of who has more children. The honest answer is probably some blend of all three, and nobody has fully closed the case. But what's not theoretical is the outcome. That one accidental mutation didn't just survive. It rode a population's migration across a continent and is still visibly present in your face right now. Now, the part that actually touches your daily life, the psychology. There's real behavioral research on this, and it's worth separating carefully from folklore, because the folklore is everywhere. You've heard the claims. Green eyes mean you're mysterious, unpredictable, fiery. None of that has any biological basis whatsoever. Eye color has zero established link to personality, and any script or think piece telling you otherwise is working from myth, not data. What the research does show is a novelty and rarity bias in perception. Studies on first impressions and facial memorability consistently find that rarer, higher contrast features get disproportionate attention and are remembered more distinctly, not because of what they mean, but simply because they're statistically unusual, and human attention is wired to flag statistical outliers. It's the same mechanism that makes you remember the one person at a party wearing bright yellow. Your brain isn't reading character into it. It's just doing pattern detection, and rarity trips the alarm. That's the real mechanism behind the staring, the comments, the wait, are those real? It's not mystique, just probability. And because the honest picture matters more than the flattering one, there's a real physiological cost to carrying this. Lower iris pigment means less internal shielding, and lighter-eyed individuals report meaningfully higher rates of photophobia, light sensitivity, than darker-eyed individuals. If you've ever noticed sunlight hits you harder than it seems to hit other people, squinting starts sooner, migraines trigger faster in bright environments. That's not you being dramatic. That's the same reduced melanin mechanism that gives you the color in the first place, showing up as a real, measurable trade-off. Ophthalmological research has also found modestly elevated risk for certain UV-related eye conditions in lighter pigmented irises over a lifetime, which is part of why UV protective sunglasses matter more for you specifically than they do for a brown-eyed friend standing next to you in the same sunlight. None of that is meant to alarm you. It's meant to give you the full, honest version instead of just the flattering half. So here's where all of this actually lands. Every layer of this, the founder mutation, the structural color, the migration theories, the rarity bias, even the light sensitivity, isn't separate trivia. It's one continuous, traceable record. Your eye color isn't a random cosmetic detail your genome happened to generate. It's a compressed archive of a single ancestor, a specific migration route, thousands of years of environmental pressure, and the exact physics of how light behaves in tissue. All you're doing every time you look in the mirror is reading a 10,000-year-old document written in a language most people never learn to see. You just didn't have the map before. Now you do. So tell me, what's your actual eye color? And what's the one thing people always assume about you because of it? I want to hear the specific version, not the general one.